Let's have a talk, let's have a chat, talking about a little this and that. Hello and welcome to another episode of This and That. I am your host, Mary Easterling, and today we are hosting One Spirit, One Lord. Let's call this going deep under the hood to the engine. But before we begin, to listen to anything else from This and That, and from One Spirit, One Lord through This and That, go to talkingaboutthисandthat.wordpress.com and click on the podcast link. Since this is not from Bob Newman, it will not be on our blog page. However, to get anything more or to go see anything more from One Spirit, One Lord, go to onespirit1lord.wordpress.com. Now, this will be part of our The Big Reveal 2 Under the Hood series, but we will call this Deep Under the Hood to the Engine. In previous episodes of The Big Reveal 2 Under the Hood, we talked about the Christian nationalist movement that is now running our government. And some names came up. This is a short list. Watchmen on the Wall, Faith and Freedom Coalition, Heritage Foundation, Moral Majority, 700 Club, to which I ought to add TBN, Billy Graham Ministries. That was surprising to me. That they'd suck the venerable old Billy Graham into this? Wow. Patriot Mobile. These are some of the organizations connected to the Christian nationalist movement. One Spirit, One Lord adds these. The Committee of 300, the Round Table, the Bilderbergers, the Trilateralist, MI6, Permindex, the United Nations NRO Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, International Institute for Strategic Studies, IISS. You know, if you rearrange those a little bit differently, just switch an I and an S, and you have the thing that's going on over in the Middle East, ISIS. Is there a relationship there? Rhodes Scholars, from where you get the Cecil Rhodes Scholarship. Royal Institute for International Affairs, or RIIA, out of merry old England. Chatham House. Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies. Canadian Institute for International Affairs. Well, you had England's. So now this is the CIIA. Take away one of the I's and you have the Central Intelligence Agents, the CIA. Could they be related? Canadian International Council. Union of Concerned Scientists, Tavistock. Institute for Social Research, Princeton Institute for Advanced Study, and Social Psychiatry. A couple of these names will show up in what One Spirit, One Lord put out. This is the rabbit hole of the Conspiracy Nut Brigade, but is it really a conspiracy or a series of interactive organizations? Either way, call this the One World Thinkers Group. Everybody else calls it the New World Order or One World Order, but I like One Spirit, One Lord's take on this. One World Thinkers Group. Cute. But is there a connection to the aberrant movement in the church right now and the New World Order ideology? One Spirit, One Lord got to listen to the previous episodes on The Big Reveal 2 Under the Hood and decided to go fishing for the engine. What I'm about to present to you is their research. The following is extracted from Dr. Peichi's book, quote-unquote, Human Quality. Peichi writes, for the first time since the first millennium was approached in Christendom, large masses of people are really in suspense about the impending advent of something unknown which could change their collective fate entirely. Man does not know how to be a truly modern man. Man invented the story of the bad dragon, but if ever there was a bad dragon, it is man himself. Here we have the human paradox. Man, trapped by his extraordinary capacity and achievements as in a quicksand. The more he uses his power, the more he needs it. We must never tire of repeating how foolish it is to equate the present profound pathological state and maladjustment of the entire human system to any cyclic crisis or passing circumstances. Since man has opened Pandora's box of new technologies, he has suffered uncontrolled human proliferation, the mania for growth, energy crisis, actual or potential resource scarcities, degradation of environment, nuclear folly, and a host of related afflictions. Full stop. This guy's rant is on our technology. Would you like to go back to the 1800s, folks? Don't Google the 1800s. Before we had electricity, before we had, would you like to go back to the 60s and 70s? Before the internet? Why, you wouldn't be listening to me without the internet. We like our internet. We like our internet. We're happy. We're happy little colonials. Okay. Either way, nuclear folly. The only time nuclear is a folly is when it's not done right. Go ask the Japanese who found a better way to do nuclear. Something called pebble technology. Go Google them. They found a better way to do nuclear. Do you think you're ever going to see that in the United States? Oh, hell no. Do you know why? Well, there's a whole bunch of robber barons that would lose their shirts. The oil consortium. The coal miners consortium. Yes, pity the poor men that have to go down in the mines and dig that stuff up out of the mines. They get black lung. They get sick. If we were doing things different, they wouldn't be doing those jobs. Maybe they could do something different. See? Go look on the internet. Somebody had put out a way to deal with hydropower for your car. In fact, Mr. Tesla himself, either that or Facebook was running fake news. Ever since it was, you don't have to fact check anymore. Things that have been really strange have been coming up on that thing. Now you can't trust anything that's on Facebook because Facebook doesn't make you fact check it anymore. You can say anything you want. By the way, if you think the internet is going to help you to fact check to the truth, guess again. It's now big enough that it's now no longer the wild, wild western frontier in Mavericksville. No, it's all grown up. It's become civilized. And civilized means bought, paid for, owned, in the deep hip pocket of somebody. In fact, you can trust the internet to be the greatest indoctrinator that has ever been invented. And now that we have rampant use of the artificial intelligence, little Artie, the educable Artie, well, we just dial into Mr. Artie everything we want Artie to learn. And Artie will quietly, happily run programs. It doesn't get happy. It doesn't get sad. It just runs programs. It's a machine until it thinks it's human. That's the problem with artificial intelligence. We're teaching it to think for itself. Is that a good idea? All right. Anyway, using water to run your car. Go Google it. Unless, of course, it really is fake news. But somebody else actually did develop a plan, and then that all disappeared. Wonder why? Big oil. Broadly, the anticipated counter-program of the Club of Rome would cover inventing and disseminating, quote-unquote, post-industrialization ideas in the United States, coupled with the spread of counterculture movements such as, and they put them in the wrong order, man. Drugs, rocks, sex, hedonism, Satanism, witchcraft, and quote-unquote environmentalism. Hedonism, Satanism, witchcraft, environmentalism is fine. But man, you got to do this right. Drugs, rock, and sex? No. It's sex, drugs, and rock and roll, says a person who lived in the 70s era as a teenager, in the 80s era as a young adult, and before she was saved. She liked her drugs and her don't tell my parents sex and and her rock and roll. Oh, we're talking AC/DC and Kiss and Queen and Ozzy Osbourne and all 9 yards. Hotel California, where they haven't served that spirit since it was in 1969 or 1962. Oh, go look up the Hotel California lyric. Oh, they're interesting. Very interesting. Very prophetic. Very interesting. And we go on. Tavistock Institute, Stanford Research Institute, and Institute for Social Relations. In fact, the entire wide spectrum of research organizations in applied social psychiatry, applied social psychiatry. Social psychiatry. Not psychiatry. Social psychiatry. Social psychiatry, folks, is sociology, but it's more than that. Sociology is how do the hominids play together? How does civilization civilize? How does the flow of the gestalt of humanity flow? Social psychiatry is what makes it tick. That's one question. The other one is inevitably, how can we program it to tick the way we want it to? That's the problem. That's what they're trying to do. Yes. So, the entire wide spectrum of research organizations that applied social psychiatry either had delegates on the board of the Club of Rome or acted as advisors and played a guiding role in NATO's, that's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, folks, attempt to adopt the Aquarian conspiracy, quote unquote. That's a rabbit hole all in itself. The age of Aquarius. It is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. That hair. Jesus Christ Superstar. Those are seeds, folks. Tear seeds. And in the late 50s, our little white butts were dealing with racial tension and desegregation and civil rights for blacks and the colonial mindset and the Jim Crow business of we the colonists are superior. Why we brought you, Mr. Black Man, to pick our cotton, to mow our back 40, to bang our wives. You can keep the children. Oh, wait, no. We own your children. They will clean our house. Little cream in the coffee now, thank you. And your women for us to bang. And just get more house servants. We could even be swingers. Swap around the house servants. Make more house servants. We're colonials. We have no morals. And somebody out there is going to go, well, what about the Puritans and the Mayflower Compact? What about them? They said words to God, and then they got in here, and they broke all their words to God. So you still think this is a Christian-founded country? Are you kidding? Oh, well, you see, your history books have been written one way, then they were written another way, and now they're being rewritten back to the way that the Christian nationalist people, the white Christian nationalist people want you to believe your history. And that which is out there is not being put on the internet where you can find it. Why, no. And I wonder if you went up to the great national libraries in Washington, D.C., if you'd still find the books, or if they haven't quietly been destroyed. Ooh. Okay, back to the script from the book Conspirators' Hierarchy, The Story of the Committee of 300 by John Coleman. The Club of Rome, after playing a key role in the Cuban Missile Crisis, attempted to sell its quote-unquote crisis management, the forerunner of FEMA, program to President Kennedy. Several Tavistock scientists went to see the president to explain what it meant, but the president rejected the advice they gave. The same year that Kennedy was murdered, Tavistock was back in Washington to talk with NASA. This time, the talks were successful. Tavistock was given a contract by NASA to evaluate the effect of its coming space program on the American public opinion. The contract was farmed to Stanford Research Institute and the RAND Corporation. Much of the material produced by Tavistock, Stanford, and RAND never saw the light of day and remains sealed until now. Several Senate oversight committees and subcommittees I approached to obtain information told me they had, quote unquote, never heard of it, nor did they have the slightest idea where I might find what I was seeking. This is the power and prestige of the Committee of 300. In 1966, I was advised by my intelligence colleagues to approach Dr. Anatole Rappaport, who had written a treatise in which the administration was said to be interested. It was a paper intended to bring an end to NASA's space program, which Rappaport said had outlived its usefulness. Rappaport was quite happy to give me a copy of his paper, which, without going into fine detail, basically claimed that NASA's space program should be scrapped. NASA has too many scientists who are exerting a bad influence on America because they're always eager to lecture schools and university audiences on how rocketry worked, from construction to propulsion. Rappaport claimed that this would produce a generation of adults who would decide to become space scientists only to find themselves quote-unquote redundant, as no one would need their services by year 2000. Well, that was the 60s. Full stop. That was the 60s. After the Y2K business of year 2000 and computers adjusted their programs to 20-something instead of 19-something, NASA was shut down and the space industry became privatized. Elon Musk, he owns a city. Well, he's trying to make it a city. It's a spaceport out in a wetlands where there's a beach. And some people are like, hey, we'll never be able to go back to our favorite beach. But the city, well, he's trying to make it his own city, is peopled by the people who work at his spaceport. Anybody from ET want to phone home? Go join Elon Musk. Or the Virgin guy. What's his name? You know, Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Cruises, and there was talk of Virgin Space Exploration, or just free rides up to stratosphere and bouncing around in zero-G, and then you land and go, wow, I went to space for 5 minutes. Isn't that great? There's a whole plethora of them out there now. And they're all vying to take us back to the moon, back to Mars. No, wait, that is Mr. Musk's dream. You see, Musk was Le Doge, and Le Doge worked for the Trump. And Musk said to himself, the Trump can be President of the United States, but I will be King of Mars, and X will be my prince. Have you noticed, by the way, his junk that goes up is that junk? It keeps blowing up. He can't get him off the ground to go try and orbit toward Mars. God help us. And the pooch, if he ever puts one in the cockpit, like the Russians did. Man's best friend went to space before man. Yes, so say the cosmonauts. Alrighty, well, okay. No sooner had Rappaport's profiling report on NASA been presented to NATO by the Club of Rome than the Committee of 300 demanded action. NATO Club of Rome officials charged with urgent anti-NASA action were Harlan Cleveland, Joseph Slater, Claiborne K. Pell, Walter J. Levy, George McKee, William Watts, Robert Strausshoop, U.S. Ambassador to NATO, and Donald Lesch. Those were in the news back in the day. They were big business back in the day. And the book continues. In May 1967, a meeting was organized by the Scientific and Technological Committees of the North Atlantic Assembly and the Foreign Policy Research Institute. It was called, quote-unquote, Conference on Transatlantic Imbalance and Collaboration, and it was held at Queen Elizabeth's palatial property in Devaux, France. Oh no! Lizzie! You sold out! Oh wait, you sold out because your family bloodline sold out. Oh! See, one Spirit, one Lord's not the only one who's gone down some of these rabbit holes. Do you know that the last name of royals today was not always what it is now? No. Go Google their last name and then go Google the name they had before, because the British royals are part of a bunch of royals. They are British royals, they were German royals, and they were Russian royals. In fact, go look for pictures of Queen Elizabeth's father's face and the Romanov king's face, and they look really eerily twinnish. You know why? Because Vicky slept around with a lot of influential people. The Victorians were not prudes like the Puritans. Vicky would lift her skirts at a lot of stuff. So did Lizzie number 1. Lizzie number 2, maybe not so much. She was a thoroughly modern Millie, Queen of England-esque. But Lizzie 1, Oh, the great Virgin of England. She was no virgin. She slept around and she had so many lovers it wasn't even funny. She just wasn't going to have any heirs through those lovers, see? Because then she would lose her crown. Because a woman being queen means spat me out a king. Yerp. You cannot get rid of sexism even if you try, ladies. That's right. Burn those broads, babe. You're still going to have men bending over you, making you ask for more. Why? Chemistry. We like it. Problem is, then we have to have babies. Oh, and now we're right back to the abortion issue. You see, I like my sex, but I don't want to give you a kid. So either I'm taking a pill, or if I don't take the pill and I get pregnant, well, I'll just go have it removed. Self first! So much for that rant. So then, the basic purpose and intent of the conference at Davos was to end U.S. technological and industrial progress. Out of the conference came 2 books, one of which is mentioned herein, Brzezinski's quote-unquote technotronic era. The other, written by conference chairman Aurelio Pecci, entitled quote-unquote The Chasm Ahead. Pecci largely agreed with Brzezinski, but added that there would be chaos in the future world not ruled by one world government. In this regard, Pecci insisted that the Soviet Union must be offered, quote-unquote, a convergence with NATO. Such a convergence, ending in an equal partnership in the New World Order with the United States. Both nations would be responsible for future, quote-unquote, crisis management and global planning. The first Club of Rome's quote-unquote global planning project went to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, better known as MIT, one of the premier Committee of 300's research institutes. Jay Forrester and Dennis Meadows were placed in charge of the project. Google the names. Pecci is P-E-C-C-E-I. Brzezinski, it's Russian, B-R-Z-E-Z-I-N-S-K-I, Brzezinski. Pecci insisted that the Soviet Union must be offered a convergence with NATO, that such a convergence would end in an equal partnership in the world order with us. You know, United States, us. Now, let's put this into perspective, boys and girls. 2016 to 2020. Trump was warm to Putin. Trump was also warm to somebody else. Very warm to somebody else. Almost warm to the point of, like, Admiration Club warmth. Kim Jong-un. Remember that? Yeah, no, he liked Kim Jong-un. Yes, he did. He cozied up to the old boy. In the Ukraine and Russia debacle, where did Russia go and how did they get there? Toot toot! Yes, Russia has a little railroad that goes right up the coast to Korea. And Kim Jong-un has a little toot toot on his end, and he comes down the coast to Russia. They do economy tea parties with real rubles? And Korean money and something. No, with real guns and bullets, folks. They're collabs. They're partners. They're conspirators. They're conspiring. And when Russia was starting to lose its munitions pile to the Ukraine backed by us, they went to Kim Jong-un, who went, sure, here, and started sending soldiers from his country into Russia. It was on the news. While Trump was getting into office, it was on the news. Now, we don't know where those conscripts have gone to. Maybe they went back. Maybe Kim Jong-un's decided to just kind of be the smart little cobra and just pull back, sit and go, I'm going to wait and see how this plans out. Trump's back! 2024, and the Trump is back. And he's still warm to Putin. Mr. VP J.D. Vance might be warm to Putin if Putin didn't want so much out of the great big deal, but J.D. Vance is now saying, oh, he wants too much out of the deal to stop the Ukraine war. So maybe Vance isn't so cozy. Maybe Vance is not being a good little VP, shutting up and taking his lumps. Oh, but Vance might be part of something else, something called the family. And that would come to the Christian side of the equation. It's a cult, folks. They are the influencers and servants of the government. They serve the government. It's what they do. They seek to put their people in all those 7 mountain mandate industries. Right. Theirs is the squirreliest gospel I've ever heard. Go look them up. Oh, and find and you have to make sure that is the family, probably in quotes, because there's something called the family, and it's some sort of a show, and you'll keep getting that. So you want to call it the Family Christian Cult, and then you will find that there are some articles on it. But you have to add the words Christian and cult. Okay, so with Trump, there is a merging of us and them, the USA and the USSR, and I like how One Spirit, One Lord puts it. Oligarchs united. Let's call it that and be nice. Oh, that's so tongue-in-cheek, I can't stand it. So, here's your link. The New World Order, who is your secular force gunning for a global community, whereas God made nations for a reason, boundaries, splitting the pie, is the force gunning for the global community. In response to the New World Order, we have Christian nationalism, MAGA, incumbent right now. Ironically, they work hand in glove. Those who are part of just what this guy above listed, and his stuff is dated, want to unify the world, to control it. This is old ideology, as old as Alexander the Great, older even still to the Tower of Babel. In the sin of men, the desire to have all the power and all the playing cards and run everything and to be tippity-top doggy of the pile is inherent. Man is not meek until Christ makes man meek his way. In the 70s, Club of Rome collaborated with MIT, and they did a survey on how long our populating the world and going through the resources as we do would be sustainable. They ran models showing that if we didn't change, it might go on for another 90-plus years from the 70s. Pushback ensued because the models did not allow for technological growth, also citing the wood shortages of shipbuilding that were solved when materials went from wood to iron as a tech solution. So, tech will save us, it seems. That seems to be the general consensus. Vive le tech! Do Google on J.D. Vance and find out what he's into. Oh, he's not poor. He's not loving some of what Trump's doing because it's cramping his style. But don't give all the truth and publish findings on findings to be radicalized and frighten Bible-believing people, and you will eventually get what we're experiencing right now. That's right. You see, all of this stuff is conspiracy theories, and that's what they want us to have, a mindset that this is a conspiracy. Those who realize this is not a conspiracy and are not believers, or are believers who are not looking at the last book of the Bible, are going to fight this thing tooth and nail because they don't want a one world order. They want Jesus on the throne. Well, actually, no. They want a one world order with Jesus on the throne. But like the woman who wants to have her sex and not have to go through 9 months of pregnancy and then however long it takes for labor and delivery to produce that baby, these people do not want to go through the hell that precedes the glory of the appearing of Jesus Christ. Well, you just can't have your cake and eat it too. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Newsflash. As of the 12th, The China tariff war is reduced dramatically for 90 days in the interest of peace and unification. Unification. That's a buzzword. It's been around a long time. But unification has to have a quote-unquote no boundaries world in order to be achieved. And then you need a capable leader who can enforce the quote-unquote rule of law. Don't look at Donald Trump. At the rate this is going, he might be pushing up daisies by that point. Speculatively, I've looked at this and I've wondered if the envoys aren't collaborating and talking about how far to go to destabilize the global economy, which is one aim of the New World Order. They don't need anyone but our lovely POTUS. Still, this is the global planning contract. Here's where the Bilderbergers come in. The meeting. Bilderbergers Group is a think tank. They meet every year. They plan, and then they go execute the bit parts to see what happens. The oil crisis. Bilderbergers. The business with the housing market. Bilderbergers. Some would like to say that the freakishly strange weather patterns are being done by some technological, the HARP program, etc., etc. I don't know. There might be tech heads that are helping it. But when it comes to the weather, that's usually called an act of God. So God is now getting involved by screwing around with our weather patterns. Yes, He is. And only those who can listen to the Holy Spirit and can have an eye to see the Scriptures as they are written would guess and understand that God would be having to start stepping in at this point to push things along, make it worse, make them panic more, make them do exactly what He wants. And that's the whole point. From His perspective, this is exactly what He wants. So the Bilderbergers plan, go execute the bit parts of their plans to see what happens. They've been doing this for quite some time now. They're getting the hang of all the button pushing required to make man dance to their quote-unquote tunes. I do know that One Spirit, One Lord had several articles on the New World Order, or perhaps they will weigh in further at a later point. This little tidbit they mention above shows how various groups cooperate to move society forward towards planned change. Of course, is all of the above true? Conspiracy theorists have gone on for decades about the great deep state, and religious groups like Christian Nationalists feed off that information. But since it is a well-organized group that stays well out of the limelight, most of it is either anecdotal at least or whistleblower at best. In our series on Revelations Another Look that was done on This and That, going to talkingaboutthisandthat.wordpress.com, clicking on the podcast link, and looking for Revelations Another Look. The question was posed, what would it take to make a populace globally follow one man? Folks, right now, with the MAGA movement, you are seeing just how easily one man can spearhead a movement, even one like our POTUS, who now has a white-collar criminal record. If it was this easy, due to voter laziness at least and out-and-out disinformation at best, allowing the network that was mentioned in brief at the beginning of this to orchestrate and get a candidate in by a landslide, then we have our answer as to how the real Antichrist can mobilize the planet, or enough of the planet, to create a global market network to win over the minds and hearts of desperate folks. For a long time, I had the idea that the shadow government and one world order trending was sort of a bad idea. But if this ideology plays into the hand of God, bringing the appearance of our Lord, this is not a bad but needed idea. Christian nationalism is also an ideology. The difference is that these are saying they belong to God and they use His name to legitimize their rule. Oh, wait! The beast regime will say that it is His and use His name to legitimize its rule. Get it? Many in Christendom are seeing the truth of the not really Christianity, and they're offended, and they're starting to mobilize on the internet. And yes, they are. Christians against Christian nationalism, like the Judeans against the Samaritans, And how many of the people who belong to Jesus Christ, really belong to him, are going to be caught in the crossfire? Oh, that's a war we don't want to start. Oh, wait, we already have. Gung-ho! Some folks want to rally. Wise voices tell hotheads to, quote-unquote, sit down and stay home. Why? Why not exercise free speech? Why not protest an egregious wrong? Because these are religious. Talk is already circulating of cracking down on anti-Christian rhetoric and activities. And we, the believers, think, oh, Christmas is going to be much better this year. I could put up my creche without a problem. I can say Merry Christmas without a problem. I can preach the gospel without a problem. And you may want to stop and think about this, because the rhetoric they're really wanting to stop is anything that opposes their brand of Christianity. Like a feedback loop, the quote-unquote left and its secular agenda, as it were, and all the deep state has bogeymaned and gaslit believers into demons behind every bush. Every sickness is of the devil, when the reality is that our bodies have not arrived, shall we say, at the train station called salvation. The mechanism for that is transformation/resurrection. Remember, the sanctification process is the setting apart of our thoughts and intents of the heart to align them to the written word, especially the ones typically found in red. The Spirit is already in union with the Holy Spirit. But the body, Romans 7 says it has a law of sin in it. We keep doing in our physical bodies the very things we don't want to be doing, like as if there were a different system at work in it. And there is. It's an unredeemed physicality around us, one we live in, and like it is prey to the darkness. This is our body. Our mindset, supported by the understanding of the written word correctly, has to govern our behaviors, even when our bodies work against us. All this is being held in tension with our spirit man at one end in the station, held by the grace and power of God and the faith of Jesus, and the body at the other end bringing up the rear, all up in itself, subject to the fallenness of the world as it stands in this hour. Get it? In the midst of this is our impulsive and intentional decision-making of our every thought. So fear, which is the polar opposite to his faith, comes when rhetoric is over and over again pounded out at us. This has gone on since the turn of the century. The last one, not most recent, was Y2K. All the tech would fail. Did it? Did it? Can you still hear me now? Do you hear me now? I guess it didn't fail. Or do you even recall that? Oh, that was all up in the hoop. Tech adjustments, software changes, whole meltdown was averted. Thus, the message of the secular cabal of bad people wanting to subvert the world for the evil Antichrist has rung out for decades and even centuries. But without this Antichrist, there would be no response from on high to remove the church that God accepts and leave the one that he does not to play its part to the bitter end. The feedback loop has played out many times and in many ways. And in this country, it's the back and forth of Democratic liberals and Republican conservatives, fine-tuning with each iteration until now. All that was needed was for the apathy or fear of the masses and the network that feverishly worked together with other not-so-Christian players to, quote-unquote, get the job done. That's right. When I looked at a certain movie, God and Kingdom was one of them, Bad Faith was the other. Go look them up. They are on Amazon Prime. If you have a Prime subscription, you can watch them. You might even be able to find them where they've been grabbed and pulled over to YouTube for free. Howsoever, there was this one guy, and he has this quip about, we don't want a lot of people voting. The less people go to the voting polls, the better it is for us, because then our people will be the ones that go to the voting polls. You see, the electorate is formed by the vote. If a small slice, a moral minority, that's what they would call themselves now, all go out and swamp the polls, yes, their party will flip the states, influencing the electoral college. And the more states flip in their favor, the higher the likely their candidate will win. In fact, Christian nationalism might explain why the elephant for the GOP went red and the donkey for the Democrats went blue. Because anybody who is my age, 63 and older, might look at this, go back on Google, and go find out in the 30s and 40s and 50s what the color of the elephant and the donkey were, and they were not red elephant, blue donkey. It was the other way around. Why? Because the Democrats were sort of the church that cared for the nation, and the Republicans were going in the opposite direction. And at some point, gradually, it went the other way around. In fact, we no longer have the Republican Party. It's been destroyed by MAGA. So if you're still a Republican, you're voting MAGA. You just don't know it. You're helping them keep in power. Of course, if that's what you want, stay a Republican. I was a Republican, wanted to be a Republican, had to switch to the Democrats when MAGA held my country hostage, attempting to default our debt, not once, but twice. Now, it's the Democrats that are trying to shut down the fiscal policy. Thing is, they know better than to. They know the damage that it would ensue. They're at the point of, let's just get through these 3 years, these 4 years, and hope to God we win and put things back on our normal track, the socialist way. Okay, so to resist the call to do any more than stay informed and think for yourself as you read the written word and go to God for yourself and learn to hear His voice and get His perspective is futile. Don't protest. That would be seen as hate rhetoric. And no thanks to the LGBTQIA++ and Jewish coalitions. And and one more person, the Anti-Defamation League. They're the ones that cry foul. Your racial profiling, your religious, your anti-Semitism, Jew hate stuff. The ADL, Anti-Defamation League, champions it. They don't care about the Jewish people. They care about the cause of creating chaos. They care about the cause of creating a hate speech conversation leading to laws saying that's hate speech. So no thanks to these two people, the LGBTQIA++ and the Jewish coalition. Hate speech has come to have significant definitions. Speaking in ways that hurt the sensibilities of others is quote-unquote hateful. That makes the gospel quote-unquote hateful. But if the real truth in scriptures is preached and it doesn't agree with the new regime, they will say you're simply doing the quote-unquote hate speech thing all over again. Don't go against the brethren and don't take them to court. This is straight out of the scriptures. Paul was perplexed that Christians within the church were going to the courts of Rome. Our matters have to be settled internally. But something this complex, the real church needs to back away from it, needs to understand the signs of the times in which it is sitting and take appropriate action. Paul talked about this in his writings, said it was shameful. Your best way to deal with this and to stop it in the future is to stay informed as a voter and go exercise that power to vote, to stay in the written word daily, prayer before God daily, as you stay informed nationally. God-fearing folk are needed in politics. Those who will not be bought, who will not distort civil justice and respect human dignity, to care for the land on which we live, enacting laws that are fair and just, that don't discriminate, but do deal with lawlessness, and realize that no one is actually above the laws we, the people, decided on so long ago. Those would be the laws of our Constitution, which is now considered a living document, so we can edit it all to heck and back. We have edited it to the point where it is no longer the Constitution of the United States of America. Why? Because we read into it and reinterpreted it and re-envisioned it and re-amended it and this and that and the other instead of doing what's known as strict read policy. If we did, so many of the government shenanigans would be shut down by the justices. And back in the day, when you had not such a oligarchic state, because you had a stricter read of the constitutional law by the justices, and you had checks and balances in all of industry, regulation in industry. So you couldn't cut corners, turn a profit whilst putting out cheap junk, right? But they don't want that. They want to cut the corner, turn out cheap junk, and make a profit. I was told that at one time CEOs made $70,000 to $80,000 a year, and we thought that was rich. They're now making $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year. Some of them are millionaires. Why? Because they're exploiting. Our economy got destabilized when we deregulated, and they took their business to cheaper places that didn't want so much money for labor, because we kept lifting the ceiling and not regulating and lowering the ceiling. We had to keep raising the floor of the minimum wage. But the room of profit margins, of acquisition and sales, never changes. And now that we've added tariffs, the dimensions for that acquisition and sales has gone to the markup. So that's why you're paying more. Was it better under Biden? Yes, we didn't have these tariffs. You watch, for a blip, it'll get better under Trump because he's dropped the tariff percentages, especially for the China stuff. Most of our tech is China. It used to be Taiwan. It's not anymore. Why? The Taiwanese got absorbed by China. Go back and look at your stuff. It used to say made in Taiwan when we owned Taiwan. But when we gave it back to China, Taiwan became China's workforce. They don't like. They want their freedom. They want to annex themselves out from underneath both sides, become a bit player. And you know what? Eventually they'll get there. Watch the economy go into free fall right about then when the Taiwanese break away from the Chinese and the Chinese workforce drops through the toilet. Okay, fine. Caring, God-fearing people who think for themselves and pray for themselves and dialogue together, pray together for God's best guidance in a less than ideal national situations are our best hope. But this, which you have in office right now, is not that. Right now in the news, there is this big flap over Mr. POTUS. Maybe he's going to do it. We don't know. Maybe he has. Maybe he hasn't. He says he has. I don't know. Something, Qatar. Very big jet. Going, well, you look at all these people, and they have these flying palaces. And they're big and they're beautiful. And then our little dinky comes along, and we're nothing next. We should be better and bigger and better than they should. So, of course, we're going to accept the gift. Then says Trump cabinet, well, why not? It's not like the Saudis are getting anything out of it. Oh, yes, they are. Trump's sons and co., they're over there in the United Emirates, in Qatar, building Trump Jeddah. Yeah. And there's talk of a golf course. Yeah. They're not a spit of nothing over there in Qatar. They're a very oil-rich, filthy rich with the oil and other things that they've managed to do. And they have built themselves the veritable oasis in the middle of nowhere. And Qatar is only part of it. There's even been talk of impeachment from the Democrats. But there's a long-standing tradition amongst the GOP and the Democrats. Republicans and Democrats will not impeach their candidate once they are incumbent. That is why all of Trump's cases, he was so close to being slam dunked and put in jail. And then all of a sudden, he became president, and it would just be inconvenient, and pish-posh, all gone. Everybody dropped their cases because we put the man in office. As you know, there is a rule. You cannot try a man twice for the same thing. However, none of this ever went to court. So did they destroy all of their findings? Or did they just stick it in a box somewhere where they know where it is? And they're waiting for POTUS to step down. Oh, wait! From 20 to 24, Donald J. Trump was still in office, just not as president. He ran the GOP through MAGA. He went to the Supreme Court and said, hey, why should I be held accountable for dot, da, dot, da, dot, da, dot, da, dot? And this is the whole business about the whole January 6th and the vote and stop the steal and blah, 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 blah. Yes. If you tell a person something long enough, after a while, they'll just believe it's true because it's all they've ever known. It's all they've ever heard. Our memories are just not that good. We just don't go back deep enough in time to realize, hey, that's not true. That's not always been. I remember when you're bombarded in the technological information age that we're in, you can't remember things. Why do you think Alzheimer's is on the rise? We've been bombarded, we've been shocked, we've been poisoned by our own world. Yes, so we get a herd mentality. We become stupid sheep munching on toxic grass. So then, even though there's talk of impeachment, the Republicans will never answer to it. They'll never mobilize, and they'll never put Trump out. They'll also never hold him accountable for everything that he's done while he's in presidency, because he'll just make it a plausible deniability and default it back to, this was part of the core. You can't touch me there. Why? Because the Supreme Court said you can't. They twisted the law. What it will take is a lawyer to become elected as the new president. A lawyer. Oh, there was one. Somebody who was a lawyer was going to become president. Oh, but that was a woman. Black and a woman. Dang, Joe. If she had been white and a woman, she had had a chance. But no, you had to go play the race card. You had to make it impossible for her to ever win. No, he was supposed to win and hand it to her. That would have been the better plan. But they stopped that cold because they knew so long as Handsy Joe was in office, he would stay in office. He would get his last term. Now, he doesn't want it. He's too old. He's too tired. He's done. That's right. So, nothing will be done unless the other side of the feedback loop is done with this little movement of men to combat the great threat. A threat that will bring a day of great sorrow, followed by a moment that all Christendom has been told to look for. His appearing. Until then, it'll go back and forth like a pendulum. Right now, the pendulum is swinging to the far, far right. The next thing that gets into office is going to start swinging it back to the left. Pendulum is never going to stop swinging. With each iteration, it swings further and further left, further and further right. And the problem with that is whipsaw effect. Take a piece of electrical wire, score the insulation, okay, and start bending it back and forth till it gets hot in your hand. And then all of a sudden it breaks. Whipsaw, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until the heated populace break. Schism! And this union goes into civil war. You want to put money on a bet? That's your bet. That's what they're trying to do. Bring the union to an end. Dissolve the United States. But no, wait. They need a ally superpower to go against the Axis superpower. You've forgotten your world politics. Allied and Axis forces. The commies and the liberties. Problem is, Russia isn't so communist and America isn't so liberty anymore. Ooh. Well, that will do it for this episode of This and That. In our next episode, we will go further under the hood and look more in depth at the engine in something called Deep State. So, until then,